next guest, Brenda Salgado.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Psychosocial Mental Health Show. This is our first episode and I'm so excited that you're watching. My name is Luis Cornejo and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and I specialize in sex therapy. And I'm so excited to be here and along with my co-hosts.
Hi, my name is Liz Hinojosa and I'm a licensed marriage family therapist. I am the content manager at PsychoSocial Media and also co-owner for PsychoSocial Therapy. And I'm so excited today. We have our first session and we will be talking about curanderismo and our guest, Brenda Salgado. Hi, Brenda.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here.
Thank
you so much for the invitation. I'm so grateful. You both look fabulous, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Brenda, thank you for being here today. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you for having me. So a little bit about myself. I'm a traditional medicine woman or curandera, and I'm really grateful for that path. I'm following in the footsteps of my maternal grandmother, Maria Alvarez Guevara Galan. And I'm grateful that a lot of the work that I do, healing at individual, collective, community levels, is guided by that path and that ancestral medicine.
Well, we're so excited to have you. Thank you so much for being here. I know that curanderismo is a big topic in the Latinx community, right, but also indigenous communities. And so I'm excited that we're going to be talking more about what that is, how it's still present now, right, and also about your own experience. So I'm excited to get started. And Liz, did you want to start with our first question?
So what is curanderismo?
It's different things to different people, but from what I've been taught, it's a different way of thinking about our mental health, our physical well-being, our energetic well-being. So it's about returning to wholeness through our relationship with ourselves, our relationship with all of our relatives, human and non-human, and remembering why we're here, being in our wholeness and our health and our well-being, and walking this path in a way where we're learning and growing.
You know, I love that you mentioned mental health because I think it's so important to also take into consideration the fact that mental health is not just going to therapy, right? There's so many different ways of helping and healing and growth and all of these different things. So thank you for pointing that out. And I'm curious, what did lead you on this path to become, curandera? What brought you here in this?
Well, it's a really old story. It starts when I'm really young. When I was a little girl, I was really connected to nature, to trees, to animals, and also felt really connected to spirit and connected to ancestors, though I don't think I had that discernment when I was a kid about what was spirit, what was ancestors, because it's all felt kind of like the same. And then I was born and raised here in Daly City, California. My parents are originally from Nicaragua. And so they raised us here with an interesting mix of a lot of Nicaraguan culture and traditional food and traditional ways of being. But then as I got older, I was just really curious about this question about spirit and health and well-being. As a very spiritual kid, I knew that a lot of what kept me healthy and well was my relationship to the earth, my relationship to trees, plants, animals, and then this connection to spirit and ancestors. And I didn't really hear that talked about in the spiritual communities I was raised in. But as I got older and started looking out at other spiritual paths, particularly Buddhist and indigenous paths, I suddenly found a place where people were talking about spirit, ancestors, relationship with the earth as part of well-being. And it was in that time that I started doing a lot of ancestor ceremony, and my maternal grandmother, my mother's mother, started coming to me a lot in dreams, and she said, it's time for you to step on this path. You haven't been told stories about when your mom and your aunts and uncles were children in Nicaragua. She said, I did a lot of healing work with them when they were children, and they haven't talked to you about those stories, so ask them about those stories. And she also said it's time for you to start training and step on this medicine path yourself. You've always known this is who you're supposed to be. You just didn't have the support around it. So I'm very grateful.
Like a lot of inspiration then, like kind of a lot of things that came together for you to find this path and to lead you here.
Yeah, so I'm very grateful to her in particular, my maternal grandmother, because I feel like she's been a very strong guide on the path.
Yeah, and it's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I think it's really, really important that when we are talking about curanderismo, we can share a little bit about what exactly it is that it means to people. Because I think in a way, it's also an individual, practice for oneself, right? It's not just something that is done in support of helping others, but also healing for oneself, right, as an individual.
I was wondering also, as you're talking about connecting to nature and like connecting to your ancestors, like, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, it's such an individual thing for different people. So talking to the trees surrounding my home and my backyard all the time, they have a lot of wisdom to share. I meditate with them. Constantly talking to the birds in the backyard, our kitty cat, Coyote. So I feel like the other kingdoms have a lot to share with us. So I'll sometimes talk to them about questions I'm struggling with, and the trees in particular are very supportive that way. With ancestors, for example, this morning I was doing some Toltec ancestral healing practices, particularly with one grandmother and one grandfather who experienced a lot of trauma when they were young, and there's ways that played out in the family. And so I've been getting guided to do more work with that part of the line, and just breathing and helping to release some of the trauma that they carried, and knowing that frees me of some of that behavioral patterning, but it also frees them in the ancestor world. I want liberation for all of my ancestors. So doing a lot of ancestral healing practices, having them on my altar, asking them for advice and gifts as well, because all of our ancestors have trauma and things they need help releasing, but they also have a lot of gifts and assets that are hard for us to access if we're not in good relationship to them.
Something I love about you with sharing is how you talk to trees. And I think it's so interesting because when I was growing up, my dad is from Mexico. And one of the things that he used to love doing was gardening. I mean, he still loves to do it. He gardens. He has a lot of trees in our house. And he talks to them. And he would tell me, the plantitas need you to talk to them because they feel good. They also feel your energy. And I always found it fascinating because I didn't know, if it was something he did that was a quirk or it was something that actually was practiced. And the more and more that I learned about curanderismo, but also traditional healing practices, I realized that it really is a synchronicity with nature, right? A connection with nature. And not just like I take care of you as a plant, but like I see you as a living, breathing, active, creation.
Growing up, my mom, she used to talk to her plants. And I used to make fun of her. And I used to call her, Mom, you're crazy. Like, what are you doing? It's a plant.
Yeah.
And now later as an adult, guess who talks to plants?
And you love to garden too, so I know you have your whole garden.
Yeah, I love to garden. Yes, I do. Yeah.
And it's fascinating too because the other part of that is the medicina, right? As well, because I also remember my mom knew a plant, a tea, something for anything. When we felt like we had a headache or a stomach ache, she would go out to the garden and pick up a plant, and she would tell us what it was, and then she would make it into something, right? And I remember thinking like, Mom, I don't want like your plants, I want real medicine, and like not appreciating it. And it took me such a long time to really learn about how medicine is rooted right in plants. I mean, that's where it comes from. That's how we learned about it, from the earth. And so just knowing that definitely gave me a big change in my perspective, and I definitely am a plant lover. I was telling Liz that the only hard thing for me is that I can't keep them alive. I try my best.
We're working on it.
We're working on it, yeah. We actually had an extra plant that was supposed to be around here, but she didn't make it.
She's
so
in the ER. She's in the ER recovering at my house.
Yeah. And she was here for like what? I called her a she because I gave her a name and everything, but she was here for 3 days. So now she's at Liz's recovery. But I do love the plants, and thank you for sharing that, because I think it's such an important element too when we're talking about cultural healing practices, that it's a connection with nature that I think in a lot of ways Western culture, right, and ideologies don't always value it the same way or see it the same way. I mean, it might be like, let's recycle and this and that, but it doesn't go to the extent of actually seeing plants as like, coexisting with us, right, as living things that feel. And
Yeah, it's one of the gifts I think of some of the teachers I've worked with. So for many years I went to something called the Festival of Traditional Medicine, and my first teachers in that space, we're 3 elders from Michoacan, and we're teaching us about plant medicine. There's also one of the founders of that space. He would talk a lot about how to be in relationship with the plants, because this goes to that question of what you said about the Western, right? They would walk us around and teach us around the different plants, but they also said, you know, when you're going to take medicine from a plant, always wait and ask permission, because you're honoring that entity, that energy of that plant as a living being. And then they also said, you know, it's really important because when you ask permission, you're being respectful to the plant. But the other is that the plant is then allowed to pull more of its life force to its core and push more of its medicine out to the part you're taking. So they said the medicine will be good whether or not you ask permission, but it will be stronger if you're in right relationship. And it will just be more respectful of the life force of that plant. So that really stuck home with me, this importance of being in right relationships, seeing them as beings and not as something you're consuming or owning, but as sovereign beings in their own right that deserve that respect.
That is so powerful. That is so powerful. And I think about this ancestral indigenous knowledge and the ability and consciousness of being able to slow down. And also, I think it's part of the decolonization work as well, and really being able to honor our ancestors' medicine, because I believe that Western medicine or Western way of thinking is you have to prove everything. Everything has to be science-based, and how indigenous wisdom is not acknowledged. However, indigenous wisdom is scientific because it's based on observation of nature, and really in that good way of being able to como se dice, be reciprocal, and like not only taking but giving and asking for permission and being respectful in that way and being in balance with nature.
And it's actually something that Liz taught me, because I remember once we were walking down the street and I would pick flowers because that's something I used to do as a kid. I love flowers, and Liz would stop me and she'd say, "Did you ask permission before you pulled the flower?" And I was like, "What? Why do I need to ask you for permission?" And I remember she gave me this big explanation around, like, you know, this, and it was very similar, right? You need to honor, you need to be respectful, you know, you don't just pull flowers off like that. And so I remember at first I thought it was a little like odd, and then the more and more that I grew and really learned, it was really about that respect with nature, right? That I, as someone who was born and raised in the US, who never really thought about it that way, didn't see it, and it obviously wasn't intentional, but it also wasn't conscious. And so I think with Liz really helping teach me about that, I've learned to appreciate so much more about plants. And I think that's really important, right, for folks out there who are watching, to also consider, right, what are some of the things that we were taught about nature? Because oftentimes the big message we get is that you can use nature, but it doesn't really, they don't really teach us how to respect nature, how to value and honor it, not just use it, right? Not just going to the beach and having a good time, right? And we could throw our trash around, but actually being there, being present, and being connected with nature in that way.
And then also allowing in the medicine they want to share with us, because it isn't, there's the respect part, but there's also the listening part, where, like you mentioned, reciprocity. So, you know, one of the examples is one of the meditations that I do with the trees is that I'll go outside in the morning, I'll say hello to the trees, I'll thank them for being the guardians around the home and what they're providing to me, but also to other beings in the community, you know, squirrels, birds, things like that. But then I'll start in a process of breathing in relationship with that tree. And what I'm doing is breathing out anything that keeps me from my unity consciousness, my health and well-being, remembering who I am, remembering my wholeness and my purpose. And then when I'm breathing in, I'm taking in that tree's wisdom around unity consciousness and being in right relationship with all that is human, non-human, because it has a lot of wisdom to teach me. That redwood tree is really ancient and old, and it's really rooted in the earth, and it's going up towards the sky. So it has, and every time I do that, it has advice for me around what I should work on that day, what can help me keep moving in that path of remembering my unity consciousness, my truth, my wholeness. So I give a lot of respect to that tree because it has wisdom for me. And it's in my stillness and my listening that some of that message can come through.
And that's so powerful too, right? When we talk about trees, because I always find it fascinating that trees can live for like hundreds of years and they do carry so much wisdom. I mean, they've seen and have been present with so much more than we have. And so I just think that I find that amazing. And Brenda, I did have another question for you. I am curious, what are some of the assumptions that you've come across that people make about curanderismo that you wish would change? You know, like what do people say about it, think about it? Um, and tell you that sometimes you're like like that's not it, or I wish that people could know this.
Yes. One thing I'll say about that is I think that there's been a lot of indoctrination of thinking about this as witchcraft, evil on one extreme, and then of course other ends of just thinking like it's not real, it's imagination, it's not useful, and again, not scientific based. Those things that not understanding that we have other ways of knowing than the current five senses, you know, and in particular around I have a lot of compassion because even members in my own family, when I stepped on this path many years ago, were really afraid. They said, Brenda's going down the devil path. You got to save her soul. You know, they would approach my mom, and my mom knew this was real because I was telling her the messages her mother was telling me from the other side, things that I could not know. And so she knew it was real, and she also didn't know how to deal with my aunt, who was very Catholic and very afraid of this stuff. And, you know, when I checked in with Grandma, she said, you know, don't be mad at her, be patient. It's not her fault. This is hundreds of years of indoctrination and being ashamed of our wisdom. And you're just reclaiming all of your ancestral wisdom, you know.
Yes.
And I really appreciated her guiding me on that path. And what she told me to tell my mom was, when my aunt starts to talk to you about that, just say, Brenda's really happy. She really loves you. She would love to talk to you about this when you're ready. And when that moment came, when we had a family member die, and Grandma invited me to do a circle and bring some medicine, and she said, "Oh, this isn't evil. This is what you do with people." And I said, "Yeah, no." And now I'm ready to tell you that it's your mother that's been guiding me on this path, and that she taught you how to do some of these things. And she remembered, yeah, she taught me how to take baths with romero, with rosemary. So, and the other thing I think that I want to share with people that feels really significant around this is, I know that there's people out there who abuse, and you have to be very careful who you work with and trust your intuition around that. But that's true in any profession. You can go to a mechanic who's really honest and fix your cars well at a reasonable rate, that compensates himself well, but doesn't take advantage of you. And there's also mechanics who will lie to you and tell you things are broken that are not broken in order to get more money out of you. The same is true in any profession. You really need to pay attention to your intuition around these things. So in traditional medicine and energy medicine, the same is true. There's people who use this work for the force of good, and people who abuse because they haven't been doing their own healing. Yeah. I understand without judgment that these are people who haven't been following their own path of healing as they're working at healing others. And so those shadows can come in and affect the way they treat people.
And thank you so much for naming those two things, because I think fear is definitely a huge one, right? A lot of people are afraid of things that they're not used to, that they don't understand. And a lot of this is lost wisdom, right? There are things that we don't know about because it wasn't passed down, because it wasn't something that was valued. And so now coming back to it, there's going to be a lot, I think, of ambiguity, but also concern for people, especially, and you know, I'll be honest, I think I will say a lot of it is based on religion too, right? That religion kind of came in, especially during colonization, and was like, everything else is not valuable. That's the, you know, witchcraft, and there's only this. And a lot of us have been functioning right under that same system, under those same ideologies. And I think now coming to a place where it's being reintroduced and being more embraced, people are starting to learn that this is not a black and white thing where it's either religion or it's curanderismo. It's the fact that there are so many beautiful ways to really connect, to heal, to grow. And curanderismo is rooted in tradition, in power, and ancestral knowledge. And so I think that it's definitely something we need to value. So thank you for naming that. You know, and the other thing too about responsibility, yes, right? That people, whether it's a doctor, even therapist, right? Not just because they have a title doesn't always mean that, you know, we're going to be seeing someone that is not, you know, that always has their best interest. And that's not to scare people. It's really to say that you should also be very vocal and aware around, your needs, because you know yourself best. And even in curanderismo, this is a partnership, it's a connection, right? That you connect with someone, not where you go and have like a power differential and someone's telling you you're this or that, right? But having someone really sit with you and guide you. And I think for me, that's what my definition of curanderismo has developed into, is really this idea of almost like therapy, finding someone you connect with, another human, and it feels like this transfusion of energy, right, that goes back and forth, and it allows for healing and growth.
Yes, yes. And it's so important to listen to that discernment. When people come and want to work with me, I always say, let's have a conversation, talk a little bit. I'll tell you a little bit about my path. You tell me a little about your path, and let's see if it's a good fit. Because not everyone's meant to work with everyone, right? And it's not a good or bad judgment thing. It's like, is it a right fit, right? Same with therapists or doctors. Like, I know my husband at one point had a doctor who just didn't jive with, you didn't feel respected by him. I said, you have the right to go find another doctor. And he did, So there's, like you said, it's no different to really trust that discernment. And really, you should really tap into, is this person helping me reclaim my love and my wholeness, or are they making me more fearful? Are they taking power away from me, sovereignty away from me? Are they teaching me to not trust my own judgment, or are they teaching me to tap in and remember my own judgment? And those are really important things to tap into when you're working with someone.
Thank you, Brenda. I had one more question. I'm really curious and excited to ask you, especially. The question that I have is, have you ever had any experiences that were synchronistic?
Oh my goodness, so many. I don't even know where to start that.
I really love talking about synchronicity.
And also, can you tell us a little bit about what synchronistic is?
Yeah.
Because I know, at least in my head, when I'm thinking of it, it's like obviously connection, right? Or some type of a few, I guess, obviously synchronizing. But I mean, in this context, what does that mean?
What does that mean for you when I answer?
I'm
asking you.
You're asking me. Synchronicity to me means when some people see them as coincidences, right? Like, for example, like if I'm thinking about somebody and then they call me, or sometimes what happens too is I'm thinking about a word and then I hear it. So if I'm thinking about, like, let's say I'm thinking about like, the ocean, and then I hear someone say ocean, or I hear it on the radio, and then that word comes up. And then also just when an experience happens and you feel like it was meant to be and it feels like a coincidence, but no, for me, actually, I see it as synchronistic. Or like I run into somebody, I was like, I was just thinking about you, and I haven't seen them in like 15 years.
Yeah, definitely being on this path, I would say synchronicity happens every day, which when you're more in that flow with the universe and listening and getting silent and listening to the guidance that comes from the non-human world, that happens more often. But just some examples of things, I have a colleague who worked with me a while back who said that they kept getting that they needed to work on their ancestral healing, and they started reaching out to very different people in their lives to ask for recommendations. And 3 different people that they knew from different contexts said, "Oh, you should go see Brenda Salgado." And then right after that, so that was in their hands. Said, "Wow, that's interesting." And then I happened to be leading ceremony at an event in Oakland, and right after she had gone out and asked those questions, she went to that ceremony and saw me there leading the ceremony. She said, "Oh my goodness, that's not an accident, right?" And she's a wonderful person, and I've gotten to do home limpias and other things with her. There's also been times like when I'm walking around and Spirit says, "Go over here," and I'll say, "Why?" This one example that I share a lot is that I was driving to go to somewhere and Spirit said, "Go to this coffee shop." And I said, "Why? I've already had coffee today." And Spirit said, No, you have to go to this coffee shop. And I went, and when I went there, I saw an old friend again who I hadn't seen for a long time. Wow. And the friend said, "Oh, I've been looking for your email and your phone, and I couldn't find it. And I'm running this mayor's campaign for this person. I really want you to meet with them and endorse them. And I said, yeah, well, why don't we set up a date for him to have tea with me?" And I said, I have to meet him before I endorse him. Like, I can't say yes to that without meeting this person and feeling their energy, their spirit, their heart. And so I remember leaving, not buying anything, and saying, "Oh, it had nothing to do with the coffee, right? You must want this person to win the mayor's race if you made me come here."
Right, like being guided, and that's so powerful. Thank you for sharing that with us, and we want to thank you again for coming in to talk to us about curanderismo. I do want to give you an opportunity if there's any last things you want to say about the topic or about yourself that you can share with our viewers.
Sure. I think what I want to say is just be open to possibility in your relationship with the plant world, with the spirit world. To also have good boundaries, just like you need to have good boundaries with people. You need to have the good boundaries with ancestors and things like that. But to be in that place of asking for guidance, asking for help, and saying anyone who is of good intention, who wants to help me on my healing, my wholeness, my path, I invite you to help me. Anybody else, you can stay out if that's not your intention. But to have that clarity and then ask, and then stop and listen. Make time for silence in your life. Make time for your relationship with the elements, with water, with earth, with air, with fire. Because we're in this time of indigenous prophecy where there's so many beings that are non-human that want to support us on our healing and our growth and our purpose in this time. And just be open to what wants to come to you.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you, Brenda.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brenda. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been an honor to share this time with you.
Wow, that was really, really great, Liz. I definitely think I learned a lot around curanderismo and also how it can support mental health. So that was wonderful.
Most definitely. And also acknowledging indigenous wisdom as well, too. It was a really, really great topic.
Yeah, and thank you everyone too for joining us. We are going to be having another episode as well. It's going to be focusing on harm reduction, and our special guest is going to be Jessie Escalante. So we hope you tune in for our next episode.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Take care.